slides together wouldn't be what they are. So that's kind of the backstory on the Sean name. These works are unique to my daily practice because they are specifically from travel, so they have a little bit more of a voyeuristic perspective. When I use the copy machine in excess, I do so critically as well as it being very indulgent in what I see as a psychological syndrome of our time, taking as many pictures as you can of every moment you can so that you can hold on to them and not be as freaked out by the transience of everything. I have a grandfather that I never met who worked for Kodak and also the government throughout the 30s and 40s. And through mining his archive, I came across documents that detailed the history of a lot of the technologies that we take for granted today, originally having been funded by government contracts that were terrified, specifically in the atomic age, that if we were to have a fallout event, we wouldn't be able to have traditional photographic methods to do surveillance. The installation of the fogged prints references that because in a high radiation environment, all film would be exposed slightly. So, where am I now? So bringing this installation together with these works from Europe and with this kind of compiled, what I call manually stegged image, tries to reference those historical impulses because for me the work is always about a psychological strata. Geological from the past because they're moments captured, because it's a lived process, clearly they're my memories. But I also try to make them memories that are accessible to other people by either being visual symbolisms or things that were familiar seeing in the street, because I consider my experience in the world the ultimate aesthetic experience, seeing the conversation that the collective landscape offers, whether it be architecture, whether it be graffiti, whether it be just moments and colors of light. That being said, some of my other interdisciplinary work has included everything from walking tours, where the art is the 2-hour event, and that's it. It is the experience. But that's kind of parallel to this work in that these are captured experiences layered onto planes that are meant to unfold multidimensionally, whether that be in the reference to the past, whether it be in the architectures that you recognize at first, or then the more you look, the more you see. Eating things as shapes are something that I respond to because I want people's eyes biologically to track shapes and colors. It's just meant to be kind of a very interesting shape that you expect in its repetition. You have a certain expectation of how the pixels should line up. Since these are darkroom prints, I mixed the scale up when I was doing the production, so they jump around in a way that's meant to correspond to what you expect from the architectural shapes, but also surprise you in the way that things aren't quite right. So when an image is stegged, it means that there's something in the code, the digital code, that either makes an extra layer of information hidden behind the pixels, or you may have seen a JPEG before that has like kind of rainbow interference. That means that someone has put extra code into the JPEG to either screw it up, or like hackers will do it to a site, they'll steg all the images, or just to have kind of an extra secret message. So that's why I call it stegged. And the way that I made this all these prints was out of a digital negative printed on old school inkjet transparency paper, and then cut into 35mm strips and printed that way. I didn't follow any outline. I could go on and on.
I have a question about the, you mentioned the fogged images, but then there are the sort of gaps in the information where there are these just white blank spaces, and is that like just
Missing information?
Places that you didn't look when you were photographing, or are they spaces that are like left out for another reason?
There's spaces that are left out to to try to draw you into wondering why these particular images are coming together in this particular shape, and also not literally or not for any specific answer, but asking yourself, well, what don't I know here? I feel like a lot of the time, you know, art is like, well, this is what you do know, this is what it is, but at the same time I want to ask the question of what don't you know, and that was the logic behind the missing information. When it comes to the process, it's all done wet. It references in some ways subway posters, but not literally, obviously, because it's a stylized tearing. And I make patterns primarily formally to make interesting optical patterns, but I also choose the content for each piece based on kind of an idea of what I want that space to mean for people. Whether it just be a mood, or whether it be a place, or whether it be a strange moment. Like this leaf blower was in France and this forest was in England, so they come together in a way that isn't possible anywhere else. But I kind of like that about all the compositions. Let's see. So, I mean, there's an implied question of permanence in any of the photography that we take. Increasingly, all the digital prints are shared and reflect who we are and become kind of an obsessive sense of identity and experience. So making them paper, for me, it's one end, it makes me cringe. I'm like, oh God, I'm making more paper in the world. What the hell's wrong with me? But then I use every scrap to some end, so not wasting a lot of paper there. But at the same time, printing them is important to investigate the history of photography that's in the work, and especially being on a printed page and existing in physical form for history in these combined collages. I guess you have to use the word collage. I was afraid of the word collage forever because, well, you know, people are like, I hate collage. Collage is just collage. It's just collage. And that's okay. Our whole life is collage. Every memory, every association. So in that sense, I've called them photo montages. But they're also in many senses collage, because a lot of people associate digital with montage, and it's important to me that they're one of a kind because they're made of little pieces of paper. They're not an addition. They are one of a kind pieces, and that's part of the question of transience and permanence. Yes, here they are, they exist on paper, but there's only one, so if it's destroyed, that's it. But it's more about how the parts come together. And then in our prolific culture, you know, I'm embracing the technologies that give us hundreds of thousands of images to sort through and have our vocabulary be so visually extended. But I'm also limiting it to, this is one. One thing that I am thinking about doing is making reproductions smaller, to play more with light, to be lenses as themselves, or windows like stained glass. But there is something that gets lost in the digital imaging. When people look at my work online, they don't really understand the texture. So in that sense, the originals are always most important.
Is there any other questions?
These are fairly small compared to the work that I usually do. They were specifically selected because they came out of the Europe series, and just the funny thing is I let people watch me make these. So if you happen to be walking down 53rd Street throughout the month of December, you might have seen me with my tongue hanging out and my hands covered in glue making these. And I wouldn't notice very often until somebody had a lens. I always could feel it when there was a lens on me, and I think that's interesting too, because I would look up and I'd be like, somebody's taking a picture of me. It was a storefront in the Donnell Library across from MoMA. So it was kind of, you know, a cliche sort of artist in the zoo vitrine. For me, it was an opportunity to make these works and explore the kind of voyeuristic aspects that gives us the technology to begin with, surveying the other and taking that evidence back to know who you are.
Thank you. you.